The morning air in Greenwich carried a sting of cold, and the iron gates of the Cole mansion creaked open like jaws weary of swallowing. Through them sped a silver minivan, tires crunching on the gravel drive. In the passenger seat, a nanny pressed her sleeve to her tear-streaked face. She was the 19th caregiver to flee within a single year, and the guards at the gate didn't even bother to comment anymore. They only exchanged glances of resigned amusement. In this place no nanny lasted. The mansion itself loomed like a modern-day fortress, its sharp edges and glass walls gleaming in the pale sun. Inside, marble halls, expensive silence, and the ruler of it all, Adrian Cole. A billionaire of the tech world, Adrian controlled every aspect of his empire but had failed to master his own household. His 6-year-old twins, Leo and Lila, were infamous across every nanny agency in New York and Connecticut. Words like untamable and unpredictable followed them like shadows. At the back service entrance, a woman stood waiting. Grace Mensah, 38, in a modest uniform, clutched her resume as though it were a fragile lifeline. She had come seeking employment as a maid, not a nanny. Her calm brown eyes reflected both fatigue and resilience, the quiet strength of someone who had endured rejection too many times yet kept stepping forward. Before pressing the bell, she whispered a prayer. Lord, make a way where there seems none. Guard the places I cannot touch. The door opened to reveal Mrs. Langston, the Cole mansion's housekeeper, dressed with her usual perfection. Her eyes traveled over Grace with the sharpness of a scalpel. Punctual, she remarked. At least that. Come in. Inside the hallway, Grace's gaze caught a framed plaque bolted under glass. Rules etched like scripture glinted under the chandelier. Silence. Precision. Discretion. Beneath those words, sharper commands waited. Staff must not touch the children without authorization. Staff must not speak to Mr. Cole unless spoken to. Staff must not meet his eyes during reprimand. Grace read slowly, the taste of old humiliation bitter on her tongue. It wasn't fear she felt but recognition, the painful reminder that people like her were expected to serve unseen, to exist as shadows. A sudden scream sliced through the silence, followed by another. Glass shuddered in its frame, footsteps pounded upstairs, and then a door slammed. A toy car bounced and clattered down the staircase. Moments later, the newest nanny, hair tangled, face flushed, badge from her agency still clipped on, came running. I quit, she shrieked. They locked me in a closet and poured water under the door. Without resistance, the guards stepped aside as she stormed out. The mansion absorbed the chaos like it was routine. At the top of the staircase, Adrian Cole appeared, descending like a judge from on high. He wore a tailored suit, sleeves rolled, his expression cold as iron. Another one? His voice was flat, almost bored. He turned to Mrs. Langston. Get a replacement before lunch. Yes, sir. As he came down the stairs, Adrian noticed Grace standing by the wall. His gaze slid over her as if she were furniture. Your name? Grace Mensah, sir. Candidate for maid. Maid. He gave a curt nod. Simple rules. Don't cause trouble, don't meddle in what you don't understand. This house runs by procedure. Step out of line and you're gone. Understood? Yes, sir. A loud bang echoed from the children's wing. Grace instinctively flinched. From behind the safety gate appeared Leo, gripping a toy hammer, banging rhythmically against the bars. Behind him stood Lila, small hands pressed to her ears, face twisted with pain. Mrs. Langston leaned toward Grace and whispered, Don't get close. They sense fear and feed on it. But Grace didn't see monsters. She noticed details others ignored. Lila's trembling, the way her breathing hitched as the vacuum cleaner roared nearby. She noticed that Leo's hammering wasn't random, it carried a rhythm, like a message no one else cared to decode. Turn that vacuum off, Grace said softly to a staff member. The man hesitated, but her voice carried quiet authority. He switched it off. Silence fell. Immediately, Lila lifted her head and Leo lowered his hammer. Grace crouched low, keeping her distance, her hands open and empty. She began to hum a lullaby, an old hymn her mother once sang, gentle and low. For a moment, the mansion itself seemed to hold its breath. Adrian's brow furrowed. What do you think you're doing? Lowering the noise, Grace replied calmly, her eyes never leaving the twins. Sometimes the world is too loud. Sometimes all we need is a quiet island. Leo and Lila took small steps toward her, cautious but drawn. Grace made a subtle gesture with her hand, fingers swaying gently in the sign for calm. Lila copied it. Then Leo followed. The staff gasped. Enough, Adrian snapped, his voice cutting. Take them to the study. And you? He pointed at Grace. With me. As Grace rose, she caught one last look at the twins. Lila's hand reached, almost touching her apron, before pulling back in fear of punishment. Grace offered her a small, real smile. It's all right. No one will shout. The house returned to its cold rhythm. But something had shifted. For the first time, the mansion had asked for her. The Cole mansion began its second morning in silence. Though everyone who worked within its glass and marble walls knew silence, there was only the eye of a storm. The guards at the gate looked grim, already predicting how long the new maid would last. Most didn't give Grace Mensa more than a week. Some whispered 2 days. By mid-morning, tension slithered through the corridors. The twins had lost another nanny the day before, and history suggested they wouldn't rest until the next adult was broken too. Staff walked lightly, avoiding unnecessary noise, hoping not to ignite another tantrum. But it never took much. Grace, in her plain uniform, carried a bucket and mop through the service hall. She kept her head down as expected, but her ears remained sharp. From the upstairs wing she heard a sound, first laughter, high and piercing, then the crash of something fragile shattering. A child's taunt followed, "Catch me if you can." She climbed the service stairs and turned into the corridor. At the far end, shards of porcelain spread across the carpet, water pooling from what had once been an ornate vase. Leo sprinted barefoot through the hall, clutching a crystal figurine like a trophy. Behind him, Lila squealed with delight, tossing pillows to block the maids chasing them. Mrs. Langston's voice cut the air like a whip. "Don't touch them. Don't engage. Just clean up the mess." The staff bent to their knees, gathering shards like battlefield soldiers clearing wreckage. They avoided looking at the children as though eye contact alone could be dangerous. Grace leaned on her mop, watching. She didn't see monsters, only children screaming for attention in the only ways they knew. Leo's grin carried more defiance than joy. Lila's shrieks sounded more like a plea than laughter. "See me. Don't ignore me," Grace thought. "Lord," she whispered under her breath, "give me eyes to see what others overlook." Leo noticed her then. His sprint slowed. He was used to adults recoiling, sighing, retreating. But Grace didn't move. She stood steady, one eyebrow raised as though sharing a secret. "You're new," he announced boldly, chest puffed. "You'll quit too." They all quit. Lila clapped, echoing her brother's chant. They all quit. Grace crouched low, not forcing a smile, not frowning either. She met their eyes. "Maybe I'm not like them." Suspicion flickered in Leo's face. Lila crossed her arms, narrowing her gaze. It wasn't defiance, Grace realized. It was testing. They were waiting to see if she would break. "Mensa." Mrs. Langston's voice cracked through the air. "Back to your duties. The children are not your concern." Grace straightened, lifted her mop again and turned away. But as she walked, she glanced back. And in that fleeting moment, she caught the truth behind their mischief. Leo clutched the figurine too tightly, not like a toy but like a lifeline. Lila's darting eyes weren't mischievous. They were searching, desperate for someone who wouldn't give up. Not monsters, Grace thought. Just little hearts no one listens to. That evening in the kitchen, the staff slumped around the long table. Their faces sagged with fatigue, their voices low. They shared stories of broken furniture, ruined tempers, Donovan Cole's sharp reprimands. A maid muttered, "I give her a week. Maybe less. She'll run like the others." Grace didn't argue. She washed her hands slowly at the sink, drying them on her apron. She had known the weight of being underestimated all her life. She carried it like skin. In her heart, she prayed silently, "If you brought me here, Lord, you did not bring me to fail. These children will not break me. I will not abandon them like the rest." Upstairs in the darkened children's wing, two small figures whispered. Leo lay on his stomach, his voice muffled against his pillow. "Did you see her?" She didn't scream. She didn't run. Lila hugged her stuffed rabbit and nodded. "Maybe she'll stay." For the first time in months, hope drifted into the mansion's cold walls. The next morning frost glistened on the manicured lawns. At the service gate, a guard handed Grace a plastic badge, his expression warning her not to get comfortable. "Punch in. Lockers in the basement. Use the service elevator only." His tone carried no welcome. In the staff room, the air buzzed with tired chatter and the scrape of mugs. Clara, a maid with warm eyes and a quick laugh, scooted over to make room. "Sit, Mensa. First week's the hardest." Grace offered a small smile of thanks. Moments later, Mrs. Langston entered, slicing the room into silence. She carried a tablet and the authority of a general. "Uniforms," she said curtly, tossing a bundle toward Grace. A gray dress one size too big, flats with worn soles and an apron already stained. Make do. Seamstress is out until Friday. Some maids exchanged pitying glances. Grace folded the fabric carefully, her respect intact even for threadbare cloth. Under her breath she whispered, "Lord, let me be small without being crushed." Assignments rolled out like military orders. Grace's list was the longest. Laundry, silver polishing, kitchen floors, guest suites. "And remember," Langston added without looking up, "staff restrooms only. Family marble is not for you." By mid-morning the house shifted into a stage. Florists bustled with lilies, caterers wheeled trays, and a planner with a clipboard barked instructions. A charity luncheon for the Women's League was set for noon. The rules: no staff visible, no noise, no mistakes. Grace scrubbed the kitchen floor on her knees while the chef's blender roared like a drill. The sound dragged her memory back to the day before, to Lila pressing her palms over her ears in panic. Grace waited for a pause, then asked gently, "Chef, could we blend with the door closed?" "Just until noon." The chef blinked, surprised anyone noticed. Sure." He shut the door and the air quieted. Grace murmured a quiet thank you no one heard. At 11 Adrian Cole entered from the garage, phone pressed to his ear. His words were sharp with numbers and deals. His presence shrank the staff 2 inches smaller. He ended the call abruptly, scanning the counters. "Who arranged the silver this way?" Grace froze. She had followed the manual exactly. Before she could speak, Mrs. Langston answered. "That was Mensa, sir." Adrian's gaze hit her like a stamp. "In this house, forks face east." Grace nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I'll correct it." She turned the forks eastward as though even cutlery bowed to his rules. By noon, pearls and perfume filled the dining room. The Women's League gathered, their laughter ribbons of judgment. Grace served water swiftly, silent as a shadow. "Excuse me." A tall woman in cream silk, Miranda Graves, lifted her manicured hand. "There's a fingerprint on my glass." Grace replaced it immediately. Miranda didn't even look at her, only at Mrs. Langston. Standards seemed to be slipping. Another woman whispered loudly, "Adrian hires anyone these days." Her friend replied, "Especially those who don't blend." Their eyes flicked to Grace's skin, then away again. The sting burned hot in Grace's chest. She didn't argue, didn't flinch. She steadied her tray and prayed silently, "Lord, guard my heart. Let dignity outlast bitterness." Between courses, Grace carried linens down a side hall. She nearly collided with Leo, barefoot, clutching a toy car. Behind him, Lila knocked over a decorative plate that shattered. Grace moved without thought. She stepped between Lila and the shards, her hand out, protective though she didn't touch. "It's all right. No shouting. No shouting." Lila's shoulders eased slightly. Mrs. Langston stormed in, scandal written across her face. "Back Mensa? Leave them." "Security." 2 guards appeared, stiff and clueless. Leo's jaw set, Lila clamped her hands over her ears. "1 minute," Grace said firmly. "No hands, no rules broken. Just a minute." "You're on thin ice," Langston hissed. Adrian's footsteps thundered in from the dining room. His eyes fell on the broken ceramic, the tense staff. "What is this?" Langston pointed accusingly. Mensa interfered again. Adrian's voice was ice. "Mensa. My office. Now." Adrian's office was colder than the marble corridors. The shelves gleamed with perfect order, and the air carried the stillness of power. Grace stood before the desk, her hands folded neatly, her heartbeat steady despite the storm she had just walked through. Adrian circled behind his desk like a hawk surveying prey. "I believe I made myself clear yesterday," he said flatly. "You did, sir," Grace answered evenly. "I did not touch them. A plate broke. I only stood between a child and the glass." He tapped a pen on the desk, each click measured. "You stood between my child and my rules." "Sir," Grace said, voice calm though her throat tightened, "I didn't break rules. I prevented blood." Adrian's jaw flexed. "Consider this your first warning. One more slip and you're finished." Grace swallowed, her dignity intact. "Understood." He watched her, perhaps expecting tears, apologies, or anger. But all he found was composure, a quiet refusal to crumble. With a flick of his eyes, he dismissed her. Back in the hallway, Clara intercepted her, slipping a folded paper into her hand. "We keep count," she whispered. Grace unfolded it to see one word in bold ink, "Write up." Clara sighed. "This place chews people alive." Grace folded the paper and slipped it into her apron like a coal still hot. God sees, she prayed silently even in dark rooms. That afternoon, the luncheon ended in applause, pearls glinting as the women's league drifted into the gallery. Grace carried dishes past the piano, her steps quiet. Near the mirror, Miranda Graves admired her reflection, her diamond watch flashing like a shard of lightning. She leaned toward Adrian as he passed. Do ensure your staff are properly vetted, darling. Some of my friends bring heirlooms here. We wouldn't want mishaps. Adrian offered a tight nod. My people are vetted. Miranda's smile gleamed sharp as glass. For your sake, I hope so. By late afternoon, the house exhaled. Grace scrubbed the last powder room, fingers raw from bleach. As she emptied a bin, she noticed a crumpled paper. Unfolding it, her breath caught. 2 stick figures drawn on an island under a stormy sky. Above them, a word scrawled shakily, quiet. Her throat tightened. She folded the drawing gently and tucked it beside the write-up in her apron. Later, walking past the children's wing, she paused. Leo stood at the threshold, staring as if the floor were a river he couldn't cross. Grace raised her hand and traced the same small sign she had used before. Come. Leo's shoulders loosened. From behind him, Lila peeked out, her eyes catching the gesture like light on water. For 3 breaths, the world stilled. Then the shriek of the event planner shattered it. Stop. Nobody move. Miranda's watch is missing. The mansion snapped awake. Radios crackled, guards rushed. Mrs. Langston's sharp eyes immediately landed on Grace. Mensa, she barked, where have you been the last hour? Powder rooms. Then the gallery. Bag check. Now. Grace's chest lifted in steady breath. She had nothing but clean hands, a worn apron, and a folded drawing in her pocket. Truth stands when lies tire, she thought. She extended her bag. Search. I'm not afraid. Above, 2 small faces peeked from a doorway. Leo and Lila watched silently, the only ones who had seen the shape of truth. The Cole mansion transformed into a courthouse overnight. Staff lined up shoulder to shoulder in the gallery while Mrs. Langston orchestrated the search with icy authority. Security guards checked bags and lockers, their radios crackling with impatience. Miranda sat poised at the table, tapping her manicured nails against the surface, each click a sentence before the verdict. You must understand, Adrian, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Theft is contagious. Allow one infraction and suddenly heirlooms vanish, reputations crumble. You cannot appear soft. Adrian stood rigid, jaw clenched, his empire built on control. And now, before his guests, control slipped like sand. Every staff member will be searched. No exceptions. Grace waited at the end of the line, her face calm though her pulse raced. She had known rooms like this all her life, where judgment was handed down before truth was even considered. One by one, pockets emptied. Chapsticks rolled, receipts crumpled, coins clattered. When her turn came, Grace handed over her bag. Inside, a Bible, folded apron, packet of crackers, and the drawing she had rescued. Mrs. Langston smoothed the paper, frowning. What is this? Grace met her gaze evenly. Something the children discarded. Miranda leaned in, her perfume sharp. How sentimental. A maid hoarding the children's scraps. Convenient. The guards searched her uniform pockets, then her locker. Nothing. Still suspicion coiled in the room. Perhaps she hides it well, Miranda suggested, her voice triumphant. Grace's hands clasped behind her back, her voice steady though her heart burned. Search again. Until you are satisfied. I'd rather face humiliation than be branded a thief in whispers. The room stilled. Adrian's eyes narrowed, unsettled. There was no fear in her voice, only unshakable dignity. The search concluded, nothing. Mrs. Langston's lips pressed thin with disappointment. Miranda's irritation flared like a flame denied oxygen. How convenient, she sneered. But I suppose she is clean, for now. Adrian dismissed the staff with a sharp wave. Back to work. As the line dispersed, Grace stooped to pick up the drawing Langston had dropped. She slipped it back into her apron. Mensa. Adrian's voice stopped her. She turned. His face remained shadowed with control, but his eyes studied her closely. You spoke like someone accustomed to accusation. Grace held his gaze. Because I am, sir. People see what they wish. And sometimes all they see is color. The words thickened the air. For once, Adrian had no quick retort. He turned to his desk, voice clipped. Go. That evening, Grace scrubbed the East Wing's marble floors alone, her brush echoing through the silence. Her prayer was quiet but firm. Lord, let my silence not be mistaken for weakness. Give me strength to stand even when pushed low. Upstairs, Leo stomped across the hall. Lila pressed her face to the window glass and whispered the word Grace had found on their drawing, quiet. But quiet never lasted long in the Cole mansion. Chapter 6, Signs and Rhythms. Weeks of chaos had trained the staff to expect storms. But Grace had begun to notice patterns. Leo's pounding fists, Lila's silence. This wasn't rebellion, it was communication no one else cared to understand. One afternoon, while polishing the stair rail, Grace heard it, a steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. She looked up. Leo crouched on the landing, drumming his toy car against the wood in a pattern. 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. Grace tilted her head, listening. Is that your song? She asked softly. Leo froze. No one had ever called it a song. He glanced at Lila, who peeked from behind a curtain. Grace tapped the rail gently, echoing his rhythm. His eyes widened. For the first time, someone had answered. Lila stepped forward, whispering, "He talks like that." Grace's breath caught. Lila had spoken, not to a nanny or guard, but to her. "And you, sweetheart?" Grace asked gently. "How do you talk?" Lila clutched her rabbit and shaped something in the air with her fingers, pressing to her lips. It wasn't random. It was sign language. Grace's eyes filled. She recognized the signs from a girl she once cared for at church. She signed back slowly, "Safe." Lila gasped and turned to Leo. "She knows." Relief flooded Leo's small frame. His fists unclenched and he tapped softer, like gratitude. That night in the staff kitchen, Grace whispered to Clara, "They're not wild. The boy taps to be heard. The girl signs to be seen." Clara froze, spoon midair. Dios mío. And no one noticed. "No one cared to," Grace murmured. Mrs. Langston overheard, her face pale and sharp. "Mensa, do not poison the staff with fantasies. Those children are disciplined, not defective." Grace's jaw tightened. "They are not defective. They are brilliant. And they've been screaming in silence this whole time." Langston's lips thinned. "One more word like that, and I'll ensure Adrian ends this experiment." But that evening, Grace returned to the twins' room. Through a crack in the door, she saw Leo tapping patterns and Lila practicing signs from a hidden book. She entered softly. "Bedtime, little ones." Leo frowned. "They don't let us talk." His voice was rough from disuse. "You can talk to me," Grace said warmly. Emily's eyes widened. "Will you leave like the others?" Grace knelt beside them. "I've been pushed out of many doors. But I don't walk away when I'm needed." Leo whispered, "They all left. Mom. Nannies. Everyone." Grace's heart ached. "I'm not everyone." Lila's fingers brushed the drawing tucked in Grace's apron. "You kept it?" "Yes," Grace said softly. "Because it mattered. Because you matter." Tears welled in the girl's eyes. Leo hid under his blanket, but she saw the truth. Their mischief masked fear of abandonment. Meanwhile, downstairs, Adrian poured a glass of scotch. Alone in the dim light, he stared at a worn photo of his late wife holding the twins. His hand trembled. "I don't know how to reach them," he whispered. From upstairs came the faint sound of Grace's laughter, soft like a hymn. The house was quiet, steady, strange. For the first time in months, it breathed differently. Adrian gripped the photo tighter, jaw hardening again. "Don't fool yourself, Cole. She won't last either." But deep down he wasn't sure anymore. Weeks of chaos had trained the staff to expect storms. But Grace had begun to notice patterns. Leo's pounding fists, Lila's silence. This wasn't rebellion, it was communication no one else cared to understand. One afternoon, while polishing the stair rail, Grace heard it, a steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. She looked up. Leo crouched on the landing, drumming his toy car against the wood in a pattern. 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. Grace tilted her head, listening. "Is that your song?" she asked softly. Leo froze. No one had ever called it a song. He glanced at Lila, who peeked from behind a curtain. Grace tapped the rail gently, echoing his rhythm. His eyes widened. For the first time, someone had answered. Lila stepped forward, whispering, "He talks like that." Grace's breath caught. Lila had spoken, not to a nanny or guard, but to her. "And you, sweetheart?" Grace asked gently. "How do you talk?" Lila clutched her rabbit and shaped something in the air with her fingers, pressing to her lips. It wasn't random. It was sign language. Grace's eyes filled. She recognized the signs from a girl she once cared for at church. She signed back slowly, "Safe." Lila gasped and turned to Leo. "She knows." Relief flooded Leo's small frame. His fists unclenched and he tapped softer like gratitude. That night in the staff kitchen, Grace whispered to Clara, "They're not wild." The boy taps to be heard. The girl signs to be seen. Clara froze, spoon midair. Dios mío. And no one noticed. No one cared to, Grace murmured. Mrs. Langston overheard, her face pale and sharp. Mensa, do not poison the staff with fantasies. Those children are disciplined, not defective. Grace's jaw tightened. They are not defective. They are brilliant. And they've been screaming in silence this whole time. Langston's lips thinned. One more word like that, and I'll ensure Adrian ends this experiment. But that evening, Grace returned to the twins' room. Through a crack in the door, she saw Leo tapping patterns and Lila practicing signs from a hidden book. She entered softly. "Bedtime, little ones." Leo frowned. "They don't let us talk." His voice was rough from disuse. "You can talk to me," Grace said warmly. Emily's eyes widened. "Will you leave like the others?" Grace knelt beside them. "I've been pushed out of many doors. But I don't walk away when I'm needed." Leo whispered, "They all left. Mom. Nannies. Everyone." Grace's heart ached. "I'm not everyone." Lila's fingers brushed the drawing tucked in Grace's apron. "You kept it?" "Yes," Grace said softly. "Because it mattered. Because you matter." Tears welled in the girl's eyes. Leo hid under his blanket, but she saw the truth. Their mischief masked fear of abandonment. Meanwhile, downstairs, Adrian poured a glass of scotch. Alone in the dim light, he stared at a worn photo of his late wife holding the twins. His hand trembled. "I don't know how to reach them," he whispered. From upstairs came the faint sound of Grace's laughter, soft like a hymn. The house was quiet, steady, strange. For the first time in months, it breathed differently. Adrian gripped the photo tighter, jaw hardening again. "Don't fool yourself, Cole. She won't last either." But deep down he wasn't sure anymore. The mansion woke to chaos. A plate shattered in the breakfast room. Leo stomped on the table, shouting nonsense words like spells flung into the air. Under the piano, Lila crouched, rocking, her hands pressed hard against her ears. Staff scrambled uselessly. Guards hovered with stiff shoulders, waiting for orders. Mrs. Langston's voice sliced through, "Don't touch them. Remove the glass. Control the scene." But nothing was under control. The louder the shouting, the fiercer the storm. Grace entered carrying her bucket and mop. She didn't rush or bark orders. She knelt on the carpet, placed the bucket aside, and began tapping her fingers gently against the floor. 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. Leo froze mid-stomp, his eyes snapping to hers. She repeated the rhythm, calm and steady. Slowly he climbed down from the table. Grace shifted her gaze under the piano where Lila's eyes glistened with panic. She signed one word with her hand, "Safe." Lila's breathing slowed. She crawled out, clutching her rabbit, and pressed against Grace's side. The staff gawked. The storm had collapsed into stillness, the children sitting quietly on the rug, Grace between them like an anchor. Adrian strode in moments later, expecting destruction. Instead he found peace. His voice cracked sharp. "What did you do?" Grace rose slowly, brushing her apron. "I listened." His eyes narrowed. "I told you to stay away from them." "With respect, sir, your rules don't change their needs," she replied evenly. The words hung dangerous in the air. No one spoke to Adrian Cole that way. But before he could answer, Lila whispered softly, "Don't send her away." Every head turned. Lila rarely spoke, and now her plea was for Grace. Adrian's expression flickered, unguarded for an instant. Without replying, he stormed out. In the kitchen, Clara whispered urgently to Grace, "You're risking everything. He could fire you today." Grace rinsed a plate, her hands steady. "Maybe. But God didn't bring me here to stay silent. Those children deserve a voice." Clara shook her head, torn between fear and admiration. "Too much courage for this house, Grace. Too much." That night, Grace walked past Adrian's study. His voice drifted through the half-open door, low and raw as he spoke to the family doctor. "They don't respond. The boy's wild, the girl hardly speaks. I've tried everything, discipline, tutors, structure. Nothing works." The doctor's sigh was heavy. "Adrian, grief changes children. They lost their mother young. What they need isn't more control. It's connection." Silence stretched. Then Adrian's voice, colder now, "Connection is weakness. If I bend, I lose control. And if I lose control, I lose them too." Grace stepped back into the shadows, heart heavy. She realized the mansion wasn't only haunted by noisy children. It was haunted by a father's fear. The next morning Grace carried fresh linens upstairs. She paused at the twins' doorway. Inside, Leo tapped softly on the floor while Lila shaped words with her hands. Grace stepped in gently. What are you saying? Lila glanced up shyly. I say, don't be scared. Of what? Grace asked. Leo whispered, his voice fragile. Of him. The weight of the confession pressed into Grace's chest. She glanced toward the hall, half expecting Adrian to appear, but the corridor was empty. She signed back slowly, you're safe with me. The twins leaned against her, small bodies trembling with the relief of being understood. Downstairs, Mrs. Langston spoke sharply to Adrian. The children cling to her. It's dangerous. They'll forget boundaries. They'll forget respect. Adrian's jaw tightened. He had seen it himself. The way his daughter begged, the way calm returned with Grace's presence. He couldn't deny results, but pride chained him. Watch her, he ordered. The first mistake, the smallest slip, and she's gone. That evening, Grace tucked the twins into bed. Leo whispered, will you go like the others? Grace knelt beside him, steady. I don't leave when I'm needed. Tears burned his eyes. Lila brushed the drawing tucked in Grace's apron. You kept it? Yes, Grace said gently. Because you matter. Upstairs, their breathing steadied. Downstairs, Adrian poured another glass of scotch, staring at his wife's photo. Her smile, their children in her arms. He pressed his forehead against the frame. I don't know how to reach them, he whispered again. Above, the sound of Grace's soft lullaby drifted faintly. For the first time in months, the house exhaled. By the third week, the mansion buzzed with rumors. Some staff whispered admiration for Grace. Others predicted her collapse. One evening, Clara said quietly over folded sheets, she's different. The children listened to her. Another maid muttered darkly, for now. Sooner or later, this place breaks everyone. But the mansion had not broken Grace. If anything, she was reshaping it. That night, a grand dinner for investors filled the halls with clinking glasses and polished silver. Adrian prowled like a general preparing for war. No noise. No mistakes. Perfection only. But perfection wasn't in the twins' nature. As guests arrived, Leo crashed at the piano, pounding keys in chaotic storms. Lila spun in circles, hair flying, humming wildly. The staff panicked. Mrs. Langston hissed, get them out of sight. Guards moved to drag them away. Grace entered. She lifted her hand. Wait. Let me try. Adrian's eyes narrowed dangerously. One mistake, Mensa, and you're finished. Grace approached. Leo struck the keys harder, daring her. She tapped his rhythm softly. 1 2 1 2 3. Then she hummed a hymn beneath the noise. Lila froze mid-spin, eyes catching Grace's. Slowly she sang. Leo's pounding slowed. He shifted, listening, then joined, drumming in rhythm, not chaos. The storm became fragile harmony. The guests leaned in, surprised. Even hardened investors softened at the sight. When the song ended, Lila nestled into Grace's lap. Leo leaned against her arm. For the first time, the mansion's storm had turned to music. A guest chuckled softly. Looks like you finally found someone who can handle them, Cole. Adrian's pride burned behind his eyes, but he said nothing. Later, Mrs. Langston cornered Grace. Don't think this makes you special. You embarrassed the family. Grace met her gaze, calm. No. I gave them a voice. That night, Adrian sat in his office replaying the scene. His children singing, not screaming. Because of her. He slammed his glass down, the sound echoing. His certainty cracked. Meanwhile, in their bedroom, Leo whispered, she stayed. She didn't run. She's different, Lila murmured, hugging her rabbit. For the first time since their mother's death, they slept peacefully. The morning after the dinner, staff buzzed with whispers. Some marveled at the peace. Others sharpened knives of doubt. Mrs. Langston's fury brewed like poison. Adrian summoned Grace to his office. He loosened his tie, jaw tight. Last night you turned my dinner into a spectacle. Do you know what that was? Embarrassing. Grace's eyes stayed steady. It wasn't a spectacle. It was your children asking to be heard. And they were. His fist slammed the desk. They are not your children. Grace flinched but didn't step back. No, sir. But they are children. And they need someone. Adrian circled like a predator. Every nanny before you failed. And you think you're different because of a song? You are playing with weakness. With chaos. Grace clasped her hands. What you call weakness I call love. What you call chaos is pain. All they want is to be seen. For a heartbeat, Adrian's mask cracked. Anger and grief swirled in his eyes. He turned away. I will not lose control. Not to them. Not to you. That afternoon he enforced new rules. The twins were to eat alone, study alone, play alone. Grace was forbidden from their wing unless summoned. Mrs. Langston delivered the orders with a smirk. Looks like your little miracles are over. Grace bowed her head, but her heart whispered, Lord, show me how to reach them even under rules. The house chilled. The children grew louder, tutors quit, staff complained. One night, Grace paused outside their door. She heard Leo pounding the wall, Lila sobbing under her blanket. Then a fragile voice, Naomi? Her heart clenched. She opened the door. Leo's face was wet with tears. Lila ran to her, clutching her apron. He doesn't hear us. Leo cried. He never hears us. Grace knelt, wrapping Lila, steadying Leo with her gaze. She signed one word, safe. The twins collapsed into her arms, trembling with relief. The door slammed. Adrian stood there, fury in every line. Enough. I told you to stay away. You disobeyed me again. Grace rose slowly, shielding them. I disobeyed fear, not you. These children aren't enemies. They're drowning while you stand on the shore. Her words cut deep. For a second he froze. Then pride snapped back. Pack your things. You're finished. The twins cried together, No. Don't send her. Grace met Adrian's eyes, steady. You can dismiss me, but ask yourself, when the storms return, who will calm them? He pointed to the door, shaking. Out. Grace obeyed. As she left, Lila whispered, She's the only one who stays. Adrian closed his eyes. Control had never felt so much like prison. Without Grace, the mansion grew heavier. Staff avoided each other's eyes. Mrs. Langston strutted as if victory were hers. At breakfast, Leo sat silent, drumming his spoon softly. 1 2 1 2 3. No one answered. Lila whispered only one word, Grace. Every attempt to distract them failed. Tutors fled. Guards grew restless. Another nanny was brought in, polished and bright. Within 30 minutes, she fled in tears after being pelted with blocks. Adrian stood among the wreckage of toys, rage simmering. He turned and saw Lila curled in a corner, whispering, Grace, Grace, Grace. Something cracked inside him. That evening he summoned the staff. Where is Mensa? Mrs. Langston stiffened. She left, sir. You dismissed her. Find her. Now. Mr. Cole, surely you don't mean to bring her back. She undermines authority. Enough. His voice cut steel. My children chose her. The word shocked even him. For years he had built walls of control. But those walls had crumbled in a single day, toppled by two children who had chosen love over fear. Hours later, Grace returned. She hadn't even reached the gates before the twins spotted her through the glass. They bolted barefoot down the hall, past guards, past Mrs. Langston's protests, straight into her arms. For the first time their storm calmed not by rules but by love. Adrian stood in the doorway, his heart a battlefield, pride against humility, power against truth. For years he believed fear kept his house together. Now he saw the truth, fear had torn it apart. That night, as the twins slept peacefully with Grace humming at their side, Adrian whispered into the dark hallway, Maybe God sent you here. Days after Grace's return, the mansion began to change. Breakfast was no longer war. Leo tapped rhythms and Grace answered, turning it into games. Lila whispered words more often, even laughing when Grace signed stories with her hands. Staff watched in awe. Guards admitted the house felt lighter. Clara whispered, They're not different, are they? Just finally seen. But not everyone rejoiced. Mrs. Langston simmered with resentment. For years she had ruled the staff with fear. Now her authority was slipping. One afternoon she cornered Adrian. This maid defies orders. She undermines you. If you keep her, you will lose control. Adrian's voice was firm. I already lost control the day my children stopped trusting me. Grace didn't break this house. She saved it. Langston's face tightened. Her reign was cracking. That evening Adrian stopped Grace at the door. In his hand gleamed the diamond watch that had caused weeks of suspicion. They found it, he said. In a guest's purse. Not yours. Grace bowed her head. I knew truth would come. It always does. Adrian studied her face, the quiet dignity that had never faltered. He realized he had built his world on money, rules, appearances. She carried none of those things, yet she was stronger than anyone he had ever met. Mensa, he said slowly, I owe you more than an apology. My children owe you their peace. Grace's eyes softened. I don't serve for apologies. I serve because they need me. At that moment, Lila's voice rang from the stairs. "We don't just need her. We love her." Leo stepped forward, nodding fiercely. "She stays or we go." The words struck Adrian like thunder. For the first time he understood, loyalty could not be bought, only earned. And his children's loyalty belonged to Grace. From that day, Grace was no longer just a maid. She became the quiet axis around which the house turned. The twins no longer woke screaming. Their laughter returned in shy bursts. They held to her apron as though it were a flag of safety. Adrian found himself watching from doorways, unsettled by how natural it seemed. Grace never demanded, never raised her voice. She listened. And they bloomed under it. One evening, he approached her as she folded linens. "How did you do it?" he asked abruptly. Grace smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything, sir. I only saw them." Her words unsettled him more than any defiance. That night, Adrian stood outside the twins' door. Inside, Grace hummed while Leo tapped and Lila signed along. For the first time, Adrian allowed himself to listen without judgment. But Mrs. Langston wasn't done. She tried undermining Grace at every turn, whispering poison in Adrian's ear. "She makes you weak. She bends the children against you." Yet Adrian had begun to see differently. "Weakness," he answered. "I see peace. That's something I could never buy." Her face tightened. She knew her influence was fading. That evening, Grace prepared to leave when Adrian stopped her again. "You've changed this house," he admitted gruffly. "And me?" Grace shook her head. "Not me, sir." "Well, children know when it's real." His eyes burned, torn between gratitude and pride. The Cole mansion had seen countless storms, broken glass, fleeing nannies, shouting matches. But now, something new grew within its walls. A fragile peace rooted in love. One night, Grace tucked the twins into bed. They clung to her hands, whispering prayers of thanks only children could make. Adrian lingered at the doorway, not as master surveying property, but as a father humbled. He whispered into the quiet, "God doesn't forget the humble." Grace turned, eyes shining. "No, sir. He never does." From then on, she was no longer just a maid. She was the anchor the house could not replace. The proof that love outlasts pride, that the humble are never forgotten.